Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Chris again with the virtual voice. I'm here again with my friend Fernanda. Fernanda, how are you today?
Hey Chris, I'm good. Thank you. How are you
Good.
today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. So it's right now, it's shortly after Christmas break. A group of my friends decided that we're all going to do this thing called 75 hard.
Mm.
And have I told you about that?
I think you mentioned it on the meeting, but not that
Yes.
much.
So it's drinking a gallon of water a day, working out twice a day. One workout has to be outside. You follow a certain diet. You read 10 pages a day of a nonfiction book. Um, and I feel like I'm forgetting something else. Anyway, there's a checklist of things you got to do every single day for 75 days. And so I'm day four. No, day 4 right now. It's going pretty good. I like it. It's fun,
Oh,
but my wife just left to go grocery shopping, and she's like, "Well, what do you want?" I'm like, "Well, there's a lot of things I want, but I can't eat those right now." So anyway, it's going to be a little bit of a torture, but the purpose behind it is just developing discipline and shaping the mind at the beginning of the year to really focus on being more disciplined. So that's the purpose behind it. The byproduct is, you slim down a bit, you lose a little weight, you get in better shape. So that's all good stuff.
that's great. Yeah, that sounds exciting.
Uh yeah, I don't know if exciting is the right word, but sure. Yeah. But
Well,
anyway, go ahead.
yeah, no, it's just like losing weight is always exciting. So yeah, maybe
Yeah,
that's a good part.
maybe that's the exciting part. Sure. I'll go with that. All right, cool. So we are actually going to cover a topic here that you and I are very excited about. It's essentially our experience working together. And so I think we have some good pointers, some good stories to tell behind it, some good lessons learned. Yeah, so what are we talking about today, Fernanda?
Okay, so today's topic is lessons learned with Chris and Fernanda being an EA. So yeah, as Chris mentioned, we have a lot of stories, a lot of learning. So yeah,
Hmm.
hopefully it's going to be helpful for all the executive assistants or the virtual teams that you may have.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, so we got a few items that we want to hit, and Fernanda will hit the first one.
Okay, so the first one, I think it's one of the most important, is recognize you need help. So yeah, as a CEO, you need to recognize that you need help because like I know we struggle with that a lot. Like it is often difficult to ask for help with
Yep.
when everything has been done on your own for a long time. So yeah, like for example, I remember when we started working, like you were doing all these tasks that I was like, maybe I can do those tasks. Like Chris, you may need help on those ones.
Hmm.
And I don't know, at first I thought like you were really attached to those tasks. And it was like, no, no worries, I'll do it.
Yeah.
But that's what we talk about, that those little 10-minute tasks could turn into 2-hour tasks. And
Hmm.
so those were things that I was able to do that I knew how to do it. So just to give you more free time just to do other stuff, other CEO stuff. So I think that's a really important step, just recognizing you need help and recognizing you have a team that can help you.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. And I would say in many cases, you do it better than I would have done it because your attention is in it, and I'm doing a task and I'm thinking about all these other things.
Yeah.
And, maybe I don't produce the best product. But so, yeah, when I remember when I say I didn't know I needed help, right? I just thought, it'd be nice if I had someone who could just read my email because I was driving a lot and they could just alert me. I could tell this person, hey, if an email comes in from these people, let me know what the email is, read it to me. I'll respond and you can type it out for me. That's
Yeah.
that's what the original plan was, right?
Yeah.
And then the common thing that the common thought that people have before they bring on an assistant is, gosh, am I going to have enough work for this person to do? Do I really need this person? There's a lot of times, and I still kind of struggle with this today where, I tell people like, yeah, just email my assistant or, call my assistant and she'll take care of it, whatever it might be. In my mind, I'm like, oh, they're probably thinking, oh, well, look at Chris. He's a big shot now with his assistant, and look how big his head has gotten. Gosh, what an ego this guy has. So I still kind of struggle with that today. But that was a big thing for me at the beginning, right? Where there wasn't really an issue with trust. It was more of like, and I think we'll probably get into this a little bit more of like, just I think I could do it myself, or are they going to be able to do it as good as me, or it takes too long to explain it, so I'll just go ahead and do it. Or the other part is, I'm not sure if we're going to cover this or not, but I always struggle with, oh gosh, I hate doing this. I'm not going to give it to Fernanda because she's probably going to hate doing it too. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it, and there's a lot of those things. So, we call crappy work something we learned from Trevor Mock in the Carrot Cast. And but that's part of the job of an executive assistant is to help out with a lot of that crappy work, so that way the CEO can focus on bigger picture stuff. So, but yeah, so just a couple of pointers on this point is mistakes are always a learning opportunity. Just know that your assistant's going to make a mistake. Empower them, show them the ropes, show them this is what you do, show them, give them like, hey, an ideal email looks like this, an ideal, product of whatever, PowerPoint looks like this, and empower them to do the job. Don't micromanage, and allow them to make mistakes, because they will make mistakes, and mistakes are perfect opportunities to learn. And and then as time goes on, they're going to do it 10 times better than you. And in some cases in our company where, we had a member on vacation and somebody needs something at the last minute, I'm like, gosh, I haven't done this in like 2 years. So I was like spending all this time researching on how to do this certain thing. And that's just a point that, this person, our team member, is the expert, and I'm no longer the expert. I'm just some guy who gets in the way every now and then.
But
Yeah.
yeah, that was really good. And yeah, as Chris mentioned, like also as an assistant, we need to recognize that sometimes we're not going to be able to do it as the CEO, but
Right.
we have just to ask. I think that's a really
Mm-hmm.
important thing. Just ask if you made mistakes, or if you're uncertain about certain things. We're going to go over the communication part just after this, but
Yep.
just learn that the mistakes that you're making are going to help you in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're making those mistakes, ask why, get feedback. It's pretty important to just the feedback.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. So just kind of add to that, one last point is allow your assistant to make mistakes with you as a CEO. But as time goes on and they're doing well, allow them and empower them to do things for the company, communicating to people outside of the company and allowing them to make mistakes in those areas too. And that's hard to do because you're thinking about reputation. Oh, I've got this big client. And what if, my assistant says something wrong and then it sours the relationship? Yeah, you have to get over that, because at the end of the day, the result, or the end product, the end state, is that you want your assistant to really know everything in your world and respond on your behalf and know how to communicate that up to you.
yeah, exactly. So let's go to the next one. So communication is key.
Mm-hmm.
So it is always good to have communication with your employees, but it is pretty important as an assistant to have communication with your assistants, because many misunderstandings always come from lack of communication. So it is pretty important that the relation between CEO and assistant is full of yeah, just full of communication. Like
Mm-hmm.
for example, it doesn't matter how big or small the problem is. And I remember like many times I was like, yeah, I'm not going to tell Chris this because it's just like it's not important. But after that, like maybe in a meeting or something, I was like, yeah, probably I should have let him know this, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't take the importance of it. So it's pretty important that the small details, the small things that you're like, doesn't matter, it's not going to affect anything, that you communicate them. And even on the personal side, like for example, I'm a college student, so right now, like for my schedule and everything, so it's very important just to let Chris know. And I know this is something that you always mention, like, hey Fernanda,
Mm.
if you're on finals, if you're struggling with some exams this week, just let me know that I don't know, you're studying or something, and we can just make it work. And I think that's pretty important because I don't know, as a virtual assistant, you may have kids, you may be in school, so it's just pretty important to communicate with your boss all the things that are important and that they might keep you from doing the work that you usually do.
Yeah.
So yeah, also your priorities. If you're sick, if you're like, I don't know, just let them know. That way they're not thinking like, oh, she's not working, or what is happening with her. So
Mhm.
I think that that's pretty important also.
Yeah, and I think the communication, setting example is on the boss, the leader. Maybe not. I mean, it's on both of them. But if there's one person who is not openly communicating, it's on the other person. I guess they both have the responsibility of bringing it out, right? Because an assistant can certainly lead their boss with the communication piece, starting off conversation, like, the personal side, right? The old school thought is don't bring your personal problems to work, but your personal problems certainly interfere with your work. And, in some ways, work is a way to kind of get your mind off things, but still you're affected, right? And whether it be something get bad, something good, or whatever it might be, it's really good to have those open conversations, before you start a meeting. Hey, how's it going? Like you and I talk,
Yeah.
personal stuff, what's going on in our lives or what we did over the weekend or whatever. That's the beginning of all of our meetings that we have. And that's a perfect opportunity to get to know people, know what's going on in their life, like, oh, wow. Fernanda tells me about school. I'm like, okay, when's the end of your semester? It's November. Oh, okay, cool. When October comes around, you got to let me know, like, how are things going with your finals, like Fernanda was saying, because it lays down that expectation of, I know her priority. I know Fernanda's priority is school. So I'm not going to get in the way of that. And my role is to really support that. So that open communication helps set expectations, and then it's not a surprise at the end. Like, oh, how come you didn't do this report? Oh, I couldn't do it because I had finals this week, and in the boss's mind, they'd be like, well, it'd be nice if you would have told me that, because then I wouldn't have been so hard on you, or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
So the communication extremely important. Priorities, as Fernanda was saying, and also method of communication is important. So one story that, Fernanda and I were talking, we're planning this podcast, and I'm like, hey, remember this happened? Do you want to like talk about it?
Yeah.
So it was and it's kind of in a way embarrassing in a way, but not really. It was a great lesson. And I think it needed to happen because it created an opportunity for us to have just like an open conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so basically, it was a couple summers ago. I had sent my wife, my family, and I were going to just a quick road trip across the Sound there in Bremerton. We're going to stay at a hotel, enjoy the swimming pool during the summertime. And as I was driving, it's like I was just thinking about a bunch of things, and I couldn't remember I can't remember right now exactly what they were, but it caused me to want to send an email on late Friday afternoon after the end of the day, and I was rushed. I just got to the hotel and I just sent out an email that was kind of short, I think. And wasn't really well thought out, and it wasn't communicated well what my true intention was. And I remember you had responded to the email, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I did not communicate this very well, because Fernanda's thinking I'm going to fire her, and that's not it at all. And so we talked it out a little bit on that weekend, but then we had scheduled a meeting on Monday to just like, hey, let's just talk through this. And we're able to hit some things that were on your mind, things that were on my mind. And honestly, I think when you have conversations like that with anybody, it And if both people are mature and receptive to feedback, then those conversations really bring the relationship a lot closer.
Yeah, I agree. And I think just the important thing there is just don't be afraid to have difficult conversations. Like sometimes and we understand that, for example, it's like, I don't want to have that conversation. I don't know, it's difficult. I'll send an email or I'll send a message, but
Mhm.
sometimes it can lead to misunderstandings. Like, hey, I didn't tend to do it like that way, or I didn't tend to talking that way. And it also happens on the personal side. So I know a lot of us experience that, maybe with family or partner
Mhm.
or like whatever. Like, it's very important that if you have important things to say, just say it maybe on a meeting, on person, because it
Yeah.
can, I don't know, it can be a problem. And yeah, I remember that situation. It was really stressful. Like, I remember it was really, really stressful. But
Yeah.
when I read it, it was just like, it was both parts, because I read it and I was like, yeah, I think Chris is going to fire me. But I was just reading it from also my emotions, like it's
Yeah.
different for each person.
Yep.
And yeah, we're going to talk about that also after. But like, for example, for emails, like, you're, hey Fernanda, read this email, let me know if it sounds good. Like, for you it may sound one way, but for me it would be different. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
very important, just to be really cautious with your words and really cautious with the way that you're saying things, and maybe also take feedback from another person,
Mhm.
because the little change of perspective may affect the way that the other person is going to receive it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that, you know, from that situation a couple summers ago when we met, it was funny. It's like, I've got this young, 18-year-old college student saying, Chris, you don't do that. You don't send emails like that. And it was great though. I needed to hear that. And I know that. And so what we decided was like, okay, going forward, this is how we're going to, whenever we have an issue like that, we have to have an open conversation. Either maybe you're not performing at a level and I need to ask you questions about it, or you're not getting enough from me and you need to know stuff from me. So it goes both ways. It's just not one way. And so I don't think I've sent you an email since then. If anything, it's like, oh, hey, check out this document that I got, or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
Outside of that, it's either over Zoom, over WhatsApp, or whatever it might be. But that was a huge lesson learned. Have those tough conversations in person if possible, if not over Zoom. Do not have them over email.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a lesson also for life, not just for work. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
good.
exactly. Yeah. I think one helps the other. The other thing that I found, well, that we kind of found that was helpful was whenever I was driving around, and this is when we owned a property management company. We also had construction projects in Washington, where I would drive around and I'm like, hey, Fernanda, we would talk about my week. Okay, Tuesdays and Thursdays are my driving days. So what areas am I going to hit? What properties and what projects am I going to hit on these days? We put it in my calendar. And then I would also say, hey, Fernanda, I'm all done here. I'm going to head over to this place. And Fernanda would have a list of my to-do items at each location. And so it was really like a team effort where whenever I was driving around, Fernando was there to say, okay, don't forget to do this, don't forget to do that, or, send me this information so I can work on this report for you, or whatever it might be. Doing those things, even if it's like complete, I still do that. Like with Joan right now, I'll just say, hey, I'm doing this right now. I'm on the phone with so-and-so right now. I'm doing this. And, it may not be necessary, but if she were to say, oh, you know what, you're on the phone with Tony. So I remember the other day you said you wanted to talk to him about this. So maybe I'll send him a quick reminder. Hey, Chris,
Mhm.
don't forget to ask Tony this, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's what the assistant's job is. It's essentially another brain, another memory, another person with amazing skills to really help me get better, right? So I found that was helpful throughout the couple years we've been working together.
Yeah, exactly. I think that that's a really good point. And also on the communication part, now that you mentioned, like, I remember many times saying like, hey, Chris, like, doesn't matter where you are, just let me know because I need to
Hmm.
check this stuff. Or like, hey, Chris, did you do this? Like, we were like, yeah, I already did. I was like, oh, could you let me know, please? Or some
Yeah.
things like
Right.
I remember that I didn't even ask you, and you told me like, hey, Fernanda, I'm writing this email to this person, or hey, Fernanda, I'm going to this place. And I was like, okay, so that's good because I saw an email that you were going to do this. So communication is pretty important that
Hmm.
way. Also, you don't create double work,
Yeah.
because sometimes also if you don't let your boss know that you're working on something, he might be like, okay, so I'm going to work on this. And then you're going to be like, well, I already finished it. So I think
Mm.
that can also be a problem there. So it's pretty important just to communicate what you're doing, like
Yeah.
as an assistant and also as a CEO.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And it's not easy at the beginning. I mean, you got to really, I was just thinking on how to, relate this to something else. It's like when you're a kid and you had to tell your parents, hey, I'm going to go to so-and-so's house. Oh, hey, I'm going to go to the store, get some ice cream. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Right. In a way, getting permission, but still telling them where you are, and so that's what it was like. It's like, okay, well, Fernanda's my mom now, so I'm going to let her know that I'm going to do this. I'm going to go eat lunch. I'm going to go play with my friends. So that's what it was like, and it's a lot there. Sometimes I would say there's probably a lot of times where like, okay, well, you're doing this and I've got nothing for you, so have fun, right? But those times where I do say something and then you come back saying, oh, hey, don't forget about this. I'm like, oh my gosh, I completely forgot. It was so helpful. And that's part of the team effort there, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah. The
let's
next
go.
one. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. You want
No,
me to do
let's
it?
yeah, let's go to the next one, the trust
All right. So the next
part.
one is trust, right? Um, it, you know, the end of the day, the assistant is really an extension of the CEO or whoever the assistant is supporting. And there's got to be a level of trust there, and it develops over time. And so initially it was like, okay, Fernanda can see my emails. That's cool. I'm certainly not going to let her give her my bank account information, all my credit cards at the beginning, but there's a slow progress there. And it's important to have that trust, but you have to create opportunities to build that trust. You have to like, okay, this is mine, my email. I'm giving it to you now. This is your responsibility now. And they're doing a great job. Like, okay, great. Yeah, here's my calendar. So I need you to be in charge of my calendar now. And then as time goes on, you know, with our background, what we kind of built up to is you were doing many things. You're, doing making medical appointments for me, oil change appointments, and ordering things on Amazon for me. And then you would pay for things for me, that you could call and do it online or whatever it might be. And that took a little time, probably about a year or so, before we started getting into like, I'll give Fernanda anything. I know I can trust her, and she's not going to compromise anything I have. And it was freeing. It was freeing because I'm like, okay, great. It was relieving. I got someone I trust who can handle all these things for me.
Yeah. And also, like for example, I remember just like and I know we talk about this, just the elevation part. Like I know you trusted my ideas on that side, that I know you mentioned like, hey Fernanda, like what should we do on this thing and what should we do with elevation. And I started telling you my ideas and you trusted on that side, that I was just hoping for the best for the company. And yeah, I don't know, on the personal side, I think an assistant, as you said, is an extension of you, and
Hmm.
it's also the person that is going to know more about you on the personal side, because
Right.
it's like, hey Fernanda, could you remind me about my kids' birthdays or things like that?
Yeah.
Like I need to do this thing or pick up my
Hmm.
mom from the airport, like all this
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
that you're going to know as an assistant. And also uh, the CEO is going to know from you, so you need to choose a person that you're going to trust, that you can rely on that person. Like, for example, also, if you go on vacation or something, you're going to leave your assistant just in charge of your email, of your bank account, or
Yeah.
like whatever. The employees also, it needs to be someone that you really, really can rely on.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's pretty important. I think that was a really big step, just starting with your calendar and everything, just
Yeah.
email, and then increase to doctor appointments, buying things and everything. Just like I think you need to show also, like we mentioned with communication, you need to show your true self. And that can be hard sometimes at work, because you're like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Just I'm going to do what I'm told to do, and I'm not going to give any more information about me. But I think that's pretty important, just to build trust and just
Hmm.
build like a really healthy relationship between the assistant and the CEO.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. We could talk about trust all day long. So let's move on to the next one.
Okay, so the next one is delegating. So I know you struggle with this a lot, Chris, and right now I'm
I still
struggling.
do.
Yeah, me too. I now I understand
Yeah. Yeah.
your
See?
posture. So yeah, I don't know. It's important because you can't and shouldn't do everything yourself. And that's
Yeah.
very important. Just remember that. Like, you
Hmm.
can't and shouldn't do everything yourself. And also, something that it's really important is that delegating empowers your team and builds trust.
Hmm.
And I don't know, I have an experience in that. Like, for example, uh I think it was the bank draws process.
Oh
I
yeah.
remember when you told me, like, hey, Fernanda, can you do the bank draws process? I was like, I don't know anything about it. I need to learn. Like, this is going to be so difficult. And I
Mhm.
remember asking you, like, hey, Chris, what should I do? And then you were like, yeah, I don't know either. Like, we're going to both learn this
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but I felt empowered. You giving me this task, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm going to do more things, and
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
this is pretty important. So I'm going to
Yeah.
give my 110%. So, and then, like, for example, other tasks that you gave me that you were doing, and you were like, hey, Fernanda, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't know, respond to that email. I know I trust you, and I trust your words. So I was pretty excited, and I was pretty happy and
Hmm.
empowered
Hmm.
that my ideas and also my work was just like being heard and
Yeah.
being seen. So I
Yeah.
think that that's something that sometimes, not as CEO, but as a leader, many of us fail, because it's like, I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
As Chris said, it's crappy work, or it's going to take me more time to explain it. So I'll just do it myself. But seeing the other person doing that stuff and being happy about it and be like, wow, this is cool. I'm learning new things. And
Hmm.
this is a new, I don't know, it's a new thing for experience.
Right.
I think that's pretty important, and we don't see that as a leaders,
Hmm.
just the empower part.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an important part too, especially if you want to develop people on your team. Um, just one story in regards to delegation. We talk about my email a lot, and that was something that was like, it was hard for me because, I was about 45 years old at the time, right? And my entire adult life, whenever internet came into my life, I was the only one dealing with my email, responding. I was the one responsible for it. So, you came on board, you started doing that for me, but I was still like holding on to it, right? I'm like, yeah, I'll let Fernanda do it, but I'm going to still kind of do my thing in it. And I think, that probably could have caused some confusion in the past. I'm not sure, can't remember any specifics about that, but I remember you came out to Washington. We were driving around Bremerton, and we were talking about email, and we were talking about game planning. And I remembered saying like, hey, I want to give my email all to you. I don't want to like be buried in my email all day long. And so we came to an agreement, a decision that you would be 100% responsible for my email. Then we go to lunch. We're at Panera. You stepped away. I was at the table, and when you come back, I'm looking at email on my phone. And you're like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm checking my email. And then I said, okay. I'll take it off my phone right now. I'm not going to look at it anymore. And then you threatened that you were going to change my password.
Yeah.
And I was like, I kind of like that. I like that. Like there's consequences to my actions here. And if I do that again, she's going to change my password and I'm going to lose all access to it. So a couple of things on that. One, I liked it because it was an accountability piece. And two, you were getting to a point now where you're like, okay, I can lead you, Chris, follow me and I will show you how to do this. Right.
Yeah, I remember that. And just like I wasn't going to change your password. I think that's, I don't know, that's too much. But it was a point that I was so frustrated because I remember you
Yeah.
telling me like the thing that I hate most is email. Like I struggle with email a lot. It takes a lot of time for my day.
Mhm.
And I noticed that, like, for example, I was like, yeah, looking at that email, replying, and I was like, okay, so Chris already did. And I was going to
Yeah.
do that. Or like,
Jeez.
I will have all those things. And I was like, okay, so I'll wait to talk with Chris about it on a meeting. So I saw that Chris already replied to all these emails that we were going to go over today. So all those things, I was like, what should I do on this
Yeah.
case? And I
Hmm.
remember just telling you, like, hey, Chris, you need to let me do email. Like, I know there are going to be certain situations where I'm going to be like, what should I do in this case? But I can send you an audio. I can send you just like a message, like, hey, Chris, like, we got this email. How should I reply? But I remember just being so frustrated that I was like, hey, Chris, I'm going to change your password if you keep seeing email. And I think that was a really important part of
Hmm.
all this journey, because after that, I think you didn't see email like for a long time. Like, I remember just asking you some stuff and everything, but I remember email, it wasn't that a problem like it was before. So
Now it certainly got better because I did take
yeah.
my email off my phone as we agreed. And I would say, okay, Fernanda knows she's just going to let me know if when something comes in. And then I could help her out with the response. If it's not immediate, we'll just wait till we meet next and we could talk about it. Um, there was one other thing I was going to say about email. Oh, and then there was one time where I was in traffic. I was in a long drive, and I knew I had this long email I needed to send to one of our top clients, and I was kind of telling you. I think I may have been just venting because I was stuck in traffic and I was miserable. And I said, hey, when I get home, I need to send this long email. And he said, well, why don't you just dictate it and I will type it out for you. And then when you get home, you can review it and just press send. I'm like, well, that's amazing. Yeah, let's do that. So it was a long email. I think it took you a long time to do it, to go through all of my
Yeah.
voice messages. But, the goal was like, hey, I don't want to write this. Fernanda can write it for me with my words. And then I can just review it, take 5 minutes to review it and click send and boom, I can go spend some time with the family. So there's situations like that where, obviously, if we didn't build that trust, I wouldn't have been able to do that, right? So it took some time. Um, for one, there's a trust goes both ways. One, you like the assistant have to do things to earn the trust of the boss, and then the boss has to provide opportunities for the assistant to show them that they can be trusted. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
So
Yeah.
anyway, let's move on to the next point.
Okay, so the next one is learn how to navigate stressful and difficult situations. So, yeah, as an assistant, it is very common for stressful situations to arise. And yeah, it's pretty common also to be like, what should I do in this case? I don't know what to do. So, either because the task is difficult or because it is time sensitive.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I think that's pretty common because sometimes you're going to get all this task and like it's for today, it's for the next hour. So you can be so stressed, so frustrated that you just paralyze or freeze and
Mhm.
you're just not doing it. So I think the two most important parts here are the communication and task prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
First, because like for example, and I remember like we had some situations like that. If you're getting a lot of tasks and they're time sensitive, ask your boss the priorities. Like, okay, so
Yep.
from this list, which is the priority? Let me know. That way I can focus on that, and then I can tackle all the other things.
Mm-hmm.
So after you communicate that, like also communicate how much time is going to take you for each task. Like for example, like, hey, for this task, it might take 2-3 hours. Is that okay? I know this is time sensitive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter. Like, yeah, okay, perfect. So, and also, and I remember you mentioned this, like, uh, we don't need like the 100%, 80% is fine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's very important because there were some tasks that you were like, Fernanda, why is not done? And I was like, it's just it's not finished yet. And you're like, okay, so show me. And I was like, yeah, it's just all these small details that I needed to fix and all these
Yeah.
things. You're like, well, if it's 80%, just give it to me because it's
Yeah.
going to be it is time sensitive and I get to deliver this today or it doesn't matter. So also
Mm-hmm.
communicate the things that you're doing, the time that it's going to require.
Yeah.
And yeah, also prioritize all the things that you have to do. That way you're not going to be, because that happens a lot also, that I remember just as an assistant, I was in this situation that I will have this many tasks and just I will focus on one. And you were like, Fernanda, that was could be done like in 2 weeks. It doesn't matter, but I needed all the stuff first. I was
Yeah.
like, well, I didn't know. Sorry. So you need to ask those things like what are the priorities for right now?
Yeah.
And how should I do it?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just I think that's pretty important on the how to navigate this stressful situations.
Yeah, we grew a lot in that area where we got to a point where like, okay, here's the priorities for the week. And every day we would like, okay, the win for today is these emails are sent out. I do this report, we do the bank draw, we send estimates out to, so like we come up with our wins for the day, which is like our to-do list. And all those things have to be things that are like moving the needle in the right direction for the company. And so that helped us start planning out better, right? That helped us out with our meeting schedule and things like that. And the reason why I bring all this up is it relates to stressful situations. If you're planned out like that, if you know what your priorities are, um, the stressful situations don't pop up as often. And when they do, it's typically a surprise, like, oh gosh, I didn't see that coming. And then you get into like a mode to solve the problem. But there's a lot of problems that pop up, stressful situations that pop up that can be eliminated with proper planning, which is what you and I really got good at towards the end of you being my EA. And just to hit on the communication piece too. So like for me, my leadership style is I don't like people to be stressed out. Sometimes a little stress is good. Like for example, if I get stressed on a deadline, I typically do better work towards the end. So sometimes stress is good, but if it's causing you stress, if I give you a task and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing, but I don't want to ask because I don't want to look like an idiot in front of my boss. For me, I want you to come to me with that because I'm like, okay, cool. In my eyes, she's asking me questions because she cares. She cares about doing a good job and
Yeah.
she wants guidance. She needs help. I'm cool with that. Let me help you out. And yeah, you know what? It might take some extra time for me. I mean, I could probably do it on my own in 30 minutes, and training you would probably take an hour. But that, you know what? That hour is going to be an investment into the future because you're going to be able to do this a lot better than me. So anyway, the communication piece is really the solution to any problem that pops up,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I cut you off. So let's go to the next one. Prioritize.
Mm-hmm.
So as we mentioned, prioritization is pretty important, and not just for the EA, but also for the CEO.
Yeah.
So as a CEO, you need to know your priorities and what's important for that day. And as an assistant, you need to prioritize the list of tasks that you have And yeah, establishing priorities is necessary in order to complete everything that needs to be done.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
this is pretty important. And I think as a virtual assistant or as an executive assistant, it's just the key for everything. And it's the key to get everything done.
Mhm.
Because if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a schedule, if you don't prioritize, your whole week is going to be a mess and you're not
Mhm.
going to be able to complete anything because
Yeah.
you don't have your priorities set. So this is pretty important, just as the communication part,
Mhm.
the prioritization.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, even in the Bible, it says, without a vision, the people will perish. And so vision really sets the priorities for the company. And there's been times where typically what I'd like to do on our meetings on Fridays, I like to let's talk about next week. Let's look at the calendar. What are the things that need to be done next week? And then we come up with that plan on Friday. But there's been times where like, okay, we're too busy on Friday, or I was traveling, or whatever it might be. And then the weekend passes and Monday comes, or like, crap, I don't have my priorities for the week. I don't know, like I feel lost, right? So taking that time to prepare and prioritize goes a long way. It keeps you on track. And we're talking about prioritizing here. So, you know, if I'm communicating my priorities to Fernanda, Fernanda knows what's going on in my world. We work together to talk about next week, because it's not just coming from me. We're working together on that, because she'll bring things up and say, you know what, you didn't get back to so and so, or this week we're supposed to do this. I'm like, oh, I completely forgot. So that open communication and back and forth helps both people get better, and we both win in our respective positions. So, priorities, setting those out helps the assistant with like reminders, putting up a to-do list, and just, the reminders it was a big deal for me.
Yeah. So let's go to the next one. So putting systems in place. So it is pretty important to have systems. And I know this is something that we struggle a lot at first because we didn't
Yeah.
have any systems.
Mhm.
And yeah, more like an assistant having systems will make your day easier. Like
Yeah.
trust me, it's going to make all your day easier, because when you don't have a plan to follow, errors can appear, and that's pretty common. Like if you're just doing everything like let's see what happens, doesn't matter, we just want the results, like you're going to see a little gaps there that they can come into to mistakes. So that's very important, just
Mhm.
to put systems. If you see something is working, write it, create a manual, also that's helpful,
Mhm. Mhm.
and follow that, because that's going to give you discipline, and at the end of the day it's going to make all your work easier.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. When we first started out, it was just, hey, can you just read my emails? And ideally, I like to respond within 48 hours. That was the only guidance I gave you. And you came up with, you found a software. Is it Trio?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
Trey.
Okay. Yeah. I say it like the white guy that I am. But yeah, so that it worked at first. I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. I mean, I'm able to open something up and I could see all, my emails, whatever. I can't remember how you had it organized. Um, but it also looked like you put a lot of work into that, and I'm like, gosh, this looks like a lot of work. I'm not sure if this is the most efficient way, right?
Yeah.
But it worked for a bit. I can't remember how we got away from it. I think we just decided, like, you know what? It's good information. It's just not efficient because it's taking up a lot of your time. So we found different ways, and that kind of brings me to the main point for me on this one is you have to experiment with different ways of doing things, right?
Yeah.
So what Fernanda and I did, we both wanted to get better in our positions. We both wanted to know, how can I, as a boss, better support Fernanda? How can I help her get better? What do I need to do to make her role and her position a successful one for her, and then vice versa for her for me? And so we sought out some education. We checked out some, I think that's going to be our next point, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I won't get too far into that, but as we were researching on, like, oh, how do we do this? How do we do this? And we would figure out like, okay, we could use a software, or maybe we do it this way because I heard a friend of mine say it, whatever it might be. And we try it out. But the thing is, when you try it, you got to be committed to it. You just can't do it, I'll do it just because we said we are, but I'm really going to do it the way we've been doing it. You have to commit to it because it's not going to stick if you don't commit. Commit to it, do it for a short time, have that open conversation like, hey, is this working out? Do you think it's efficient? Is there a better way of doing this? And it's like, no, this is working out really well. Cool. Let's continue doing it. Now this is kind of taking out too much of my time. So let's find another method of doing it, because it's certainly something that you need to do. So we got to a point where we we were like trying all these different softwares, and I think we just came up with a folder system in my email, right? That you say, hey, whenever you end, just go to this folder and that's it. And then for the calendar, we did color coded stuff. We decided to do different things in there to help out. So yeah, can you think of any other examples where we came up with a system?
Well, as you mentioned, like for example, I think we only had one meeting
Yeah.
before, just like
Mhm.
I think it was on Fridays or Mondays, and we talk about like, hey, let's do Mondays and Fridays. Mondays are just to plan the week, and I think that was really helpful.
Yeah.
Mondays to plan the week, Fridays to see how the week went, and what are the priorities for next week. And
Yeah.
I think that's very important. And I don't know, like I have a friend that she's also a VA. So she told me like, hey, Fernanda, I know you were like a VA. Like, do you have any advices on that? I was like, for example, meetings are important.
Yeah.
So like, for example, on the Friday meetings, I remember telling you, hey, Chris, what are your priorities for next week? Okay, so these are my priorities for next week. We will check the schedule, check everything. And also, just like in this part of putting systems in place, I know it's not kind of a system, but just in the trust part, just knowing the person, knowing your boss, knowing the things that he likes to do, what he's trained about. Like, uh, I remember just talking with Joan about it, and I was like, hey, just for example, for meetings, try to do it in the morning, because in the afternoon, sometimes Chris is drained.
Take his age
So
into account here. He's an old man. He gets tired at the end of the
exactly.
day.
Exactly. It's like he's almost 60 years old, so it's too much.
Whoa. Dang, that was hard.
No,
Hey,
just joking.
yeah. So yesterday, Fernanda had some memories issues. So she's getting up there too in years, right?
Exactly. Just don't embarrass me here, Chris. Just like getting on my 20s is hard.
Goodness.
But yeah, I don't know. The system part, I think that's also pretty important. Just like know the routine, because
Yeah, that's a very good point.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes like uh I don't know. Sometimes they can prefer to do meetings in the morning, or
Mhm.
maybe your boss can say, I really need to work out on the afternoon. And if you're putting meetings on the afternoon, it's not going to work. So you need to create systems based on routines and
Yeah.
based on the person's preferences. So I think that's pretty important there also.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, just getting to know the person you're supporting. How are they operating at certain times of day? One thing that you were helping me out with is reminding me to eat my lunch, because I never ate
Oh yeah.
lunch. So you put that into my calendar, and so yeah, I think that's a very good point, because this executive assistant, it's not a secretary. A secretary is somebody who does tasks like, oh, do this for me, do this for me, do this for me. An executive assistant is like your helper, you're the person who's like your number one teammate, who helps you be a better version of yourself, you
Exactly.
know. And it's not just work, it's on the personal side too. Like, my wife and my kids, you've been up to my house a couple of times, so you've met them. And so it's like, kind of a part of the family type thing, where um it's more involved than just tasks. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
um, but yeah, so those systems are important, and you can do a better job with the systems if you know the person you're supporting very well.
Yeah. So let's go to the next one.
Yes, the
So
next one.
is sorry, I thought it was you, but it was me. Sorry about that.
Go for
Mistake
it.
there.
No worries.
So yeah, it's never stop learning. So always improving. And that's really important because we have a core value on elevation that it's always improving.
Always
So
improving. Yep.
it is pretty important that in any position that you are, it doesn't matter if you're, I don't know, in finance, doesn't matter. Just
Hmm.
like you need to always uh improve. You need to be educate yourself, I don't know, with books, podcasts, videos, like even your ideas can make a big difference in a company. And
Hmm.
like for example, also here is the feedback part. Just like if you see someone that they're struggling in their area, or if you see like just like that little gap of improvement, you can just let them know. And also just being open for
Hmm.
any feedback that you have. Also, I found it very helpful, and I remember just asking you like, hey Chris, like I don't know, like right now with marketing, like, hey, did you like the page? What do you think about this? Just like, I really want your opinion because that's going to make me better. That's going to make my work better. And
Hmm.
just take it, don't take it as, oh, I'm making all these mistakes and they don't like my job or they don't like the work that I'm doing. Take it as, okay,
Yeah.
I'm learning and I'm going to get better. So yeah, like for example, I remember we were struggling a lot with all these assistant things and everything. And I remember you telling me like, hey Fernanda, this podcast is really good, and it's about assistants, and it's from Carrot. It's pretty amazing. So I was like, okay, so let's hear it. I saw the podcast and I created all my notes. And I remember it was like a 1 hour long meeting, just talking and brainstorming about
Yep.
all the things that we needed to do, that we have to do. So yeah, I don't know, it was pretty amazing because from that podcast, I think we've accomplished so much things together. So yeah, just the learning
Yep.
piece, it's pretty important there.
Yeah, it is, because both parties, both people involved need to learn how to get better and how to be better, working together, how to make things more efficient. Yeah, I can't remember. I think it was working out when I listened to that Carrot Cast, and Trevor Mock, he's the CEO of Carrot, so he interviewed his executive assistant, and they talked about a lot of things. They talked about some of their struggles, some of the mistakes they made. In fact, I rewatched it last week, and it was really good. I took some more notes from it, and so Fernanda wrote it, watched it. She took notes. I took notes, and then we got together and like, okay, let's talk. What are we going to take away from this, and what couple of things are we going to do from our notes from listening to this podcast? So I can't remember exactly what we implemented from there, but the other part, we did implement a lot of stuff because we did improve a lot over several months, while we were really focusing on trying to get better. But one thing that I enjoyed about that podcast with Trevor was that they were open about like, hey, we didn't know what we're doing, or I just brought her on to do this, and then she started doing other things. We're like, okay, maybe you could do this. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of like our story, right?
Yeah.
you know so it made me feel like, okay, this guy who's accomplished is actually has been in my shoes before, and it's great. And his assistant's been in Fernanda's shoes before. So we got a lot out of that. A few months after we watched that, they did a second one that you and I watched, took some notes, got some great takeaways from that as well, and we kind of like increased your role over
Yeah.
time. But yeah, so doing things like that where you're both doing it, you're both taking notes, and you're like, okay, what's our takeaway, and what are we going to do going forward? What changes are we going to make? What new habits are we going to do? What is it that we want to do from this? What did we learn? It could be a podcast. We've read a book together, um, and now I'm starting to do that with other team members on the team, right, in their respective areas. So But yeah, that's certainly important that you both are taking the time to get better, not just individually, but together as a team.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned, just in the part, like for example, I remember just watching the podcast and just seeing, oh, well, she's struggling with the same things that I'm struggling now. It's just sometimes we think that the relation between assistant and CEO, it's always going to be perfect. And it's like, oh yeah,
Hmm.
I'm all doing all your emails and it doesn't matter. Like you're going to trust me and everything's going to be fine. And all the work is going to be done from the next day.
Hmm.
So no, it requires time. It's
Yeah.
a long process. So just keep that in mind because I know, like, I don't know what you feel, Chris, but sometimes I know I was frustrated because I was like, I feel that I could be doing more things, but
Mm.
I don't know. I don't know if it's the right time to do it. I don't know if Chris trusts me in this area.
Yeah.
So yeah, I saw that sometimes they were like, "Oh, she's been my assistant for 15 years and we're still working on it,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we're still struggling with the
Hmm.
email, we're still struggling with all these things." And I was
Hmm.
like, wow, we were, I think, 6 months, 1 year I was being your assistant, and I was so frustrated because I was struggling with some things. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
so just need to keep learning, keep going, and don't get frustrated. It's
Hmm.
going to require time. It's going to require a lot process of trusting, communication,
Hmm.
and yeah, systems.
Yeah. And then, one point that I wrote down here is, you got to share what you're learning with each other. Like, you may not be reading the book I'm reading, but there's times where I'll send you a photo of a something I underlined in my book, and I'm like, hey, this is what we were talking about yesterday, and I'm reading about it today. And you're going to school, and your school is business oriented, so you're taking certain classes. I'm like, oh wow, what are you learning? What can we do? That you're learning in class. How can we apply that to what we're doing at Elevation? So yeah, it's always important to just learn together, but also share what you're learning, because that when you do that, it really drives good conversations, good brainstorming sessions, and you get a lot accomplished.
Yeah, exactly. And now that you mentioned, I'm pretty excited about that. Like, for example, as you said, for college, just having those classes and asking my teachers, like, hey, I work and I saw that it's happening. I don't know where I work. Like, what should we
Mhm.
do in this case?
Yeah.
And then telling Chris, like, hey, Chris, I learned something new. So we can start applying those things. Or
Yeah.
what do you think about all those things? So it's
Uh-huh.
just communicating
Yeah.
what you learn, as Chris
Mhm.
mentioned. So I think that's very important. And that will lead us to the next one. The brainstorming sessions are
Mhm.
important. And that's,
Yeah.
I think, the thing that we have most fun with is just like brainstorming
Yeah, we
sessions.
do. We spend so much time on that. And I think it's because you and I both enjoy it. It's like,
Yeah.
let's talk about ideas. It's a lot of fun. We still do it, even though you're not my assistant, where we still do it. It's like, okay, because you're in marketing now. Let's talk about marketing. What's some ideas? But yeah, those brainstorming sessions are important, because you're just like, okay, let's create an environment here where Fernanda's open to just say whatever's on her mind regarding whatever we're talking about, and I have the same right to say whatever comes to my mind. And you just kind of evaluate and like, oh well, Fernanda, that's a really good idea. I mean, I can tell you how many ideas that we took from you and we implemented, right? Not just with you, but other members on the team. Like, hey, that was a pretty darn good idea. So let's go with it. So
Yeah.
those brainstorming sessions they're a lot of fun because we like talking ideas. You personally have a very business oriented mind, so you think differently, and you have different thoughts than me, which helps because it brings in a different perspective, um, of to whatever it is we're talking about. And what I like about our brainstorming sessions, and I say this a lot in our group settings, is like, I don't want the ideas coming from me or I'm talking too much. I want to hear from you all, because I want that other perspective. I don't want the decisions, oh, because Chris said so. I want it to be like, hey, this is the team. We had a discussion and this is what we're doing.
Exactly. And I think that's very important. And that's uh a thing that I really like from Elevation is that
Mhm,
you empower the team, you know, like you
mhm.
empower everyone to say like, hey, if you have ideas, it doesn't matter if it's not from your area, if it's something from finance, maintenance, or
Yep,
just like doesn't
exactly.
matter.
Yep.
You can tell your ideas, like
Mhm,
no idea is wrong, no idea is bad, they're just ideas.
mhm.
So say what's on your mind. And as you said, like sometimes I don't know, a person from finance will say an advice for marketing, it will work because
Yep.
it's another perspective. So you have to accept that,
Mhm.
that bringing new fresh thoughts, fresh minds to another area, to the company, it's
Mhm.
going to be for the best. And
Yeah.
also, like for example, I don't know, I had so much fun with we were planning the taglines or the vision for the company, and
Yeah.
everyone was saying all these ideas, and we got together and formed this bunch of ideas and everything. But
Mhm.
it was just like family getting together and
Yeah.
just planning and building something together, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I think it feels different that just you as a CEO building it on your own, and having all these persons that are part of the team just
Yeah.
building it together. I think that's very important. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, as you said, the brainstorming sessions are always fun. We're both visionaries, so we
Yeah.
can get crazy with the ideas, and we're like, yeah,
Very
let's
crazy.
do this and all those things. So,
We're gonna
yeah,
do renovations on the moon.
exactly. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the next company.
That's 2024. Yeah. But yeah, so I would say that the one of the important things about brainstorming sessions is actually developing tasks
Yeah.
from that session, right? I've been a part of meetings where this is a table full of visionary people and like idea and idea and idea. It's like, wow, everyone's getting excited, like, oh, we're going to do some great things. And they're like, okay, who's going to do this? And it's just quiet. And everyone's looking at each other. Well, I don't want to do it. It was my idea, but that's kind of your area, right? Like, don't have that. No, have an agenda. All right, from this time to this time, we're just going to have open conversation. Whatever comes out, say it. But at the end, we're going to say, okay, what are our takeaways? These are the things that we want accomplished. And with that, what tasks are associated with that, right? And what are we going to do? And what's the deadline and who's responsible for it? That's our whole level 10, right? The EOS
Yeah.
model is brainstorming sessions are great, but they're best if you have tasks with deadlines and milestones and all that stuff. So yeah, I wanted to throw that part in there. But yeah, the idea of throwing it around with you, it's we do that. We were doing it last night, right?
Yeah.
And we'll just I'll be on the treadmill walking or whatever, and then I'll send Fernanda a message. Hey, I'm thinking about this, and then we kind of go back and forth for a few minutes. So it's always fun to have someone who's got like the same kind of likes in regards to brainstorming and visionary type stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And just as Chris said, turn ideas to plans. Don't let it just in there. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah, that
Well,
was really
sweet.
good.
Yeah, that was a good one today. This was something that Fernanda and I were really looking forward to because she and I have learned a lot over the last 2 years, and there's still more we need to learn, right? And that's
Yeah.
part of the fun of the journey. But if anyone is ever thinking about, gosh, should I have one? You probably should. And that doesn't mean you have to hire someone full time. You came in, I think when you first started, you were 30 hours,
Yeah.
even though I think you were putting in more. But we started like majority of the people we started them part-time. And then we gauged the work level, like, okay, I think it's time you come on for 30 or 40 hours now. Right. So, um, start small, give this person some tasks to help them build trust with you, gauge the workload. And as time goes on, like, okay, they got these skills. So I'm going to give them some of these things. I'm going to give them some of that. And just know that it's a process. They're not going to come on day one and they're not going to be superstars. You might think that from like the first week because, oh, wow, this guy's a person's amazing. This girl's amazing. But after a while, it may not be like that. Just know that, it's a journey. You're going to have your ups and downs. It's going to be times that the EA is going to drop the ball on something, or the CEO is going to drop the ball on something. You got to have grace for each other on that. And I think that's one thing that you and I learned over time is like, Fernanda, you have the authority and you have the right to be mad at me, and it's okay if you get mad at me, and I'm fine with it. But we need to talk about it if you are, right?
Yeah.
So, and I tell that to everyone on the team. I know people, when humans get involved, people are going to get angry with each other because, one side feels expectations were not met. So when that happens, we have to come together and say, okay, where are we at? How do we get back on the same page? Where did I let you down? And how can I clear things up? So anyway, I'm rambling on all this stuff. There's so much we learned. This will probably move into a second podcast sometime on other things that we think of after this episode. But anyway, any final thoughts from you, Fernanda?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I know we're going to do maybe a part 2 because there are a lot of things that we learned through this journey,
and a lot more stories to tell too.
Exactly, a lot more stories. But yeah, I don't know. As Chris said, if you're thinking of getting an assistant, just get it in. Maybe I think a really important thing is just write all the things that you don't like to do as a CEO.
Exactly.
Be like, I don't like doing email. I don't like doing these things. Okay, so in which things an assistant can help me? Okay, so she can help me with appointments. She can help me with meetings. I don't know, interview process, blah, blah. So it's just checking on what areas you don't like and what can free your time. That way you can focus on another things. And just start searching for a BA. I don't know, it's pretty cool just to have someone that you trust and someone that that the work is going to get done. So it's just that. And I don't know, just having an assistant and being an assistant is a journey. So you have to enjoy it. It's going to be sometimes frustrating. Sometimes it's going to be like, wow, I love my job. Sometimes going to be like, what am I doing here? So it's a long journey that you have to learn, both parts you have to learn and communicate about it. So I don't know. It was pretty cool. I really like this episode.
Yeah, it was fun. It's always fun to share stories. And if someone's interested in getting a VA, an assistant, or whatever it is with their company, maybe you're just looking for someone who could do some financial stuff or marketing. You can go to VPM, virtual, I forgot what it's called, virtual property management. I think they're changing the name. But Pete Newbig from our episode 1, they have a full platform full of talent from overseas who know English and are looking for work to support remotely. And I think it's, that's the whole basis of our podcast, is to, let everyone know that there's talent overseas, whether it be in Mexico or the Philippines, and they do a great job, and you can scale your business using a remote team. And it's a win for everyone who's involved. So anyway, I think that's about it from me, Fernanda.
Yeah, from me too. So I'll leave the link below on the description box if you want to check the website from BPM. So it's pretty cool. And I think that was today's episode. We were pretty excited just to record this. And I remember you sent me a message like, this is going to be fun. So it was fun.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Definitely.
thank you everyone, and hope you had some great holidays on this holiday season. And see you on the next episode, and stay virtual. Thank you.